All right, folks, it's 10 a.m, so we will get started, and I dare say Mark will be joining us very soon. But hello and good morning to everybody who's joined us for the Business Insights webinar. Today we're talking about staying competitive and relevant amongst moving targets and changing demographics. Yes, it's quite a mouthful, but certainly a topic that we've been thinking about, we've been throwing around, and certainly one which is particularly relevant. And following on from our last webinar, which was addressing sort of external influences and responding to them, demographics and changing markets is certainly one of those. And in the opinion of the panel today, and I dare say just about anybody and everybody out there, deserves its own webinar and really deserves its own attention. So we've decided to do a bit of a deep dive into that today. We'll be looking at things such as demographics, the definition thereof, some of the basic things that constitute a demographic, but then diving a bit deeper, okay? What are the things behind sort of age, sex, gender, marital status, so on and so forth? And then following on from that, what does it mean to remain relevant and continue to add value to your clients and the market space in which you operate in? So joining us today, we have Dr. Mark Sinclair, who's not with us yet, but I do expect him to be joining very soon. Iona McKimmie, our Chief Executive and Academic Officer here at Mentor Education. Iona, welcome.
Thank you, James. Great to be here.
And as I always say, a man that requires absolutely no introduction whatsoever, Dr. Jim Taggart. Jim, great to have you with us.
Good morning, James. Good morning, Iona, and good morning to our listeners. Thanks for taking your valuable time, hopefully to pick up some pearls that are going to help you with your business. So a very warm welcome to all of you.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned this idea of valuable time, and look, it is very valuable. And Jim, I know one of your goals, particularly with these sessions, is to have people walking away, stepping away from their desk and thinking about the content that we've delivered today. It's as much about, I think, presenting information as it is putting questions to our audience. Would I say that's true and correct?
Absolutely. I often think, James, Iona, and listeners, that sometimes the questions are harder than the answers. It's really getting self-introspective and being self-critical about where you want to be. And I mean that, where do you want to take your business? That's assuming you know where your business is. And they're fundamental questions that we'll look at and explore in a very changing, turbulent, but very exciting period in history. I've never been more excited about business. But you know, if you're going to catch a certain fish, you need to put a particular bait to do that. And business is about that. How critical are you of you? And that's a really important question.
Thanks, Jim. Well, certainly that self-reflection is very important. And I mean, I think this idea of knowing where you are going fishing for clients, you know, where are you going to add value is particularly important. So up here in front of us, I have really what is a very general and broad list of what defines demographics, everything from age, gender, race, marital status, number of children, occupation, annual income, education, and of course living status, so whether you're a homeowner or a renter. Yeah, all of these elements in many ways I think identify targets, clients, sectors that we might want to get into. Iona, as Chief Executive Officer, I'm going to hand over to you. I mean, how important is it to have an understanding of these particular elements? And do you find that one particular element is more important than the other, or do they sort of all work in some element of cohesion?
Demographics and collecting demographics and analysing that information are incredibly important to us. And it doesn't matter when we're running a business, it doesn't matter what stage of a business we're at, it doesn't matter what the market is. We need to know who we talk to. We need to know who we want to talk to. We need to know who's talking to us and what they're talking to us about. But it's fair to say that as we collect information about our clients, and often we have a vast amount of information that we don't tap into, that we don't look at and we don't consider. And we don't consider utilising that information to actually have quality conversations with people who are our prospective clients or potential contacts, as well as our existing clients. For example, age, gender, and education level. We know that people at different stages of life use different types of social media, for example. So if we're going to have a conversation with our wider market, we may actually consider breaking it down, and we may consider what conversations we have with which demographic on what platform. So it's incredibly important. We know that if we're working with somebody who is, for example, under 25, that we'll have a different type of conversation, and we might structure our message very, very differently than we would if we were structuring our message to, say, someone who was 55 plus. The other thing too is that knowing our clients, knowing our business, knowing who makes up our business, because our businesses, of course, don't exist without people. Yeah. I don't think there's a business that exists from computer to computer. I'm probably wrong there, but yeah. But, you know, there's always a human element, and there's always our consumers or our clients. Yeah. So the other thing too is that this helps us profile our service. It helps us know what we do and where our real client base is. We might think, you know, that all of our clients are 35 to 45 and male. And when we actually start drilling down into our information, we find out that that's completely wrong. We've got 53% of our clients that are actually female, and they're between 30 and 40 years old. So again, we have a different conversation, and we're able to target our conversations and have quality conversations with our clients. I think the other thing too is that when we start to bring into account things like income, living status, education level, that tells us too whether or what type of products that we may actually be, or what type of conversations we may actually be having with clients. If we, for example, distribute an expensive range of products, you know, products that are worth more than $5,000, those demographics will be very interesting to us, because they'll actually help us build a relevant message and create our points of difference that we can actually talk to that demographic about. So back to you, James.
Excellent. Thanks, Ina. Well, look, it's a very interesting point that you make there, and I've seen this mistake across businesses time and time again, where it's hypothesized or basically guessed what their target market is, who their customers are, and it's not until they take the time to really look into what their demographics are that they can in fact construct their message, construct their products, their entire delivery schedule to actually meet that. I mean, there's different tools, of course, that you can use. You know, I mean, that can be client surveys and whatever it may be. Jim, I'm going to hand on over to you, certainly with your experience in, say, the financial services sector. I mean, running a firm for 25 odd years. I mean, how big a role did demographics play in targeting your messages, your product and service? And I mean, obviously, certainly over a 25-year period, it changed over time as well.
They're absolutely correct. You can hear me quite clearly now, James?
Loud and clear, Jim.
Okay, great. Because I'd like to add, Iona made some excellent points, and I'd just like to put this in the context of what we were talking about, demographics, because it's really critical to understand this in a commercial sense. While we were talking about the demographics, we need to be looking at subtly the changes to demographics, because they influence needs, attitudes, delivery, values, and something that a lot is not spoken about, although the literature talks about, is migration. So all of these aspects combined, either one or two, or are singular, and provide an insight, if you like, a lens to the impact on the demographics taking place. And really important in this day and age. Iona said a really good platform with regards to those really key demographics. For example, there is a big push with regards to values of the business and values of the individual. And so if, for example, I'll just make this an example as part of our business. If I made it that we really were very strong on white Anglo-Saxon images and so on, and didn't care about refugees or didn't care about other things, and that came through, that will influence people's buying power, their decision making, their values in dealing with our firm. So what I'm saying to people, those demographics are a signal to what we are, and equally, what are we saying when we conduct business ourselves in the marketplace? So I was really impressed with trying to bring that about. And as I say, the world is not 7 continents anymore. It's a global village where people travel to Hong Kong for 3 days to do business and come home. That never took place before. So the world is very different in the way that we look at demographics. And to understand that is really, really critical. And we would ask you on behalf of Mentor to really critically analyse your data. What is the story they're telling you? What are they telling you about what they want? Is the product the prime thing, or is it secondary and mixed in a whole range of other values? And that then we can talk about price and so on. But it's really clear to understand those particular things and so on. Because one of the other things that I'd just like to highlight, if I may, in the context of this to think about, is that the demographics give us data. And that data has meaning and it reveals relationships. And those 3 characteristics are really critical. And you'll see that with James putting up the next slide. So I just want to summarise that again, that the characteristics of data, what does your client base tell you? The meaning, and that meaning coming from the relationships, if any, and then that, as Iona politely and so well put together, income, age, tastes and needs. How does all of that fit into the recipe, the stew of your business, so to speak? So that's really critical to be thinking. Remember, the challenges that we provide for you at Mentor is for you to think about your business.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. Now, I've put as you said, a little bit of information up in front of us, which I pulled from the ABS this week, which goes on to identify what the median age here is in Australia. Okay, so more specifically, the median age of the Australian population has increased by 2 years over the last 2 decades, from 35 years at 30th of June 1999 to 37 years at the 30th of June 2019, or last year. So 37 years represents the median age in Australia. So what does that mean for our targeting? What does that mean with respect to where is our biggest market component going to be? And the reason I ask that question is, if you dig a little bit deeper beyond just the median age, I'm going to pull up another slide here. So rather than try and catch you out or trip you over, what we have next is the working age in Australia. So it would be very easy to jump in and think, okay, this is where my target market is. But this idea of median age becomes somewhat even smaller. That market becomes smaller when you look at working age, depending on the product in which you're delivering. I mean, sure, if you're delivering products such as prams or bassinets or whatever it may be, take into account those who are 1, 2, 3 years old. But if you're delivering other services which require an income, really you're looking at 16 to 18 plus. Iona, I'm going to hand back to you to talk about targeting with respect to age, but also taking into account other factors. And by all means, let's use working age as an example, but there are also other elements that come into play.
Most definitely. And this is where we bring into play some of our marketing elements, and we start to look at things like buyer personas and product profiles and how important they are when we're actually building a relationship with our market, as Jim so correctly referred to it, because it is a relationship. It's a constant conversation that we're having with our wider market and with our clients. We know that people at different stages of life have different goals. We know that over the lifespan, some people will change careers 3 times. We know that across the lifespan, people's socioeconomic status can increase and decrease and be affected by a number of factors: health, level of education, a global event such as we're going through at the moment, a local event, which could be, a downturn in a market, or it could be a physical or an environmental event. So one of the important things that we do is we actually build a profile of who our clients are. So we take all of that information that we know, and we then look outside, and we look outside at and benchmark against what maybe some others are doing and the types of conversations they're having. And it helps us to, if you like, it would be great to talk about this for the next 4 hours, but we've got a limited amount of time. So
yes, I would have cut you off before then, Iona.
Yeah, I thought you might do. So it's really important, you know, and it's the old thing of know your business and know your client. So the other thing we sometimes that we don't do is think about an engagement strategy. And an engagement strategy with potential clients and a potential market is incredibly important. So as part of our engagement strategy, we develop a strategy to, one, identify who our clients and our potential clients are. We may have had a market shift, so we've got an age shift, as we saw before in the median age, be from 32 to 35, or 32 to 35. So we may actually look at that message that we've been using, and do we need to adjust that? We develop a profile of our clients. Who are they? When do they read the paper? When do they look on the internet? What are the things they like, and what's important to them? And then we look at how we can actually get that message out there to them. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is a product profile. We know we have these people that we work with every day. We have existing relationships. We know that we want to build more relationships with those people. But how much do we actually know about our product? And that's a really interesting conversation for us to have internally at any organization, because often we might, for example, produce leather jackets, and we might distribute those, across a number of stores. But do we really understand that that lovely leather jacket that we produce is suitable for the demographic that we're actually marketing it to? So we need to look at our products as well, and we need to build value in our products. And we also know that when times are tough, people look for money. So we also have to think about what aspect of that our potential clients find relevant. So, and I think Jim will probably have some things to add here as well, where we're looking at markets and clients and products.
Very, very much. Iona, James, and listeners, let me make 7 very important points if I can, and I'll try and say them slowly, but I try to reflect upon wider readings. And I'd like to tell you these, and this is from a writer called Griffith, and he says, number 1, spend time where your customers spend time. 2, connect in ways that your customers want to be connected. 3, engage your customers. Just don't talk to them. Be aware, but also make sure that you're not alarmed by what your competitors are doing. Know trends, create great content that solves problems, and of course, pursue excellence as a problem solver. They're really critical in what we're trying to say today. And so the question to all of our listeners is, do you do that in terms of staying relevant? They're really critical with regards to it. And one thing I've been asking a number of businesses, James and Iona, is what have you done with the coronavirus in terms of your business case? And I would go as high as to say 100% of people that I've asked have done nothing. It's been reactionary. And so for me, I'm saying, have you considered building your business case, and what elements are there in a business case that helps you to stay relevant? Now, I understand the pandemic has been one that's never probably been undertaken by many of you in business, but you need to lead on the front foot, to use a term, rather than being reactionary. And so I'm saying to you, what is your business case? And do you have enough information to build a business case that can take your business forward? And I'm hoping that we at Mentor will look at the whole notion of business case and those various types of elements at a later date that will help you build a business case to undertake staying relevant in a changing and turbulent market. But those staying relevant, those 7 key aspects are really critical with regards to it. And the theme running through that, if you are not, and I'll say this to you, if you are not engaged with your customers, they'll be talking to someone else.
Very much, Jim. And I think each of those points is something to break down into each, I suppose, of the different demographics or even the age groups that your clients, and something else that I want to bring in a little bit later is this idea of where your employees are as well.
Yes.
Look, it is a bit rough around the edges, but a simple rhyme that I remember to, I suppose, break up ages and demographics is the paid, laid, great and afraid. So that paid group, you're 16, you're getting your first part-time job, you're sort of into your mid-20s. That laid, which is obviously a colloquial reference, you're starting to get married, partner up, grade, you're getting into your 40s, and then by the time you're 65 onwards, you're afraid. Now, it resonates a lot, particularly, say, with risk management, with investment profiles, whether it be financial services or real estate or whatever it may be. But the same sort of breakdown, I believe, in many respects can also be applied to different demographics, irrespective of what it is that you're offering. So, Jim, just with getting back to this idea of staying relevant, how is it that each of these points would apply, or what changes would you make in addressing each and every different group that forms part of your market? Of course, once you've taken the time to identify what it is, and perhaps some real-world examples that you saw in the delivery of financial services.
By all means. Mark, when we talk about Maslow and our needs and so on, if you have a relationship which is purely buy-sell, then that's not really a relationship. And so in the financial services, like we had things like we went out, we put on seminars. We went out to dinner with our A-class clients. We went to football. We had tipping football competitions. We took to art galleries. We had picnics. We had a whole range of things that engaged people, that made them feel that they were part of that relationship. We knew, for example, as I've often said, and people can quote me, the quality of your questions determines the quality of your answers. How many of you realize and know when someone is finishing their degree or their higher school certificate, or when they're going to high school or getting their first car, when they're getting married, when baptism, when they're buying their first house, what happened to them? So all those key events are triggers to building relationships. We used to, for example, have lunch boxes for people sending their children to school for the first time. Now, if you're a parent, for example, or an uncle or an auntie or someone, one of the most key events is when that child starts school. That's got nothing to do with an income protection or a set of accounts. It shows that you know that client and that you're prepared to make them feel a relationship and to celebrate that moment in their life. They are key things with regards to it. Do you know when any child is going to represent their country, their state, playing sport? All of those things are critical because they are values that are important to that family. If that family is important to you in the relationship, then that will develop over time. To buy a box of pencils, little things with your names on them are really critical. A very interesting one, and I'll just say this to you for everyone. As parents, uncles, aunties, grandmothers, grandfathers, a really difficult time for many of those people is when children get their license for the first time or learn to drive. The whole rites of passage of when they get a car, to be able to go out, to be able to do a whole range of things comes into play. One of the consequences of that, of course, is road accidents. And I'm only telling you what the statistics. The highest rate of deaths is 17 to 24. Another aspect associated with suicide, 17 to 24-year-olds. And now there's figures coming out, 13 to 18. So if they are relevant values of your business and they are relevant values of people, then why not put on a seminar? It's got nothing to do with superannuation. It's got nothing to do with a whole range of things. But if you ask your key A-class clients to bring other people who have similar situations, then they're learning about what you value, that you put on those things. And clearly it's not very difficult to get a policeman to show carnage around a car accident that's happened with 17 and 18-year-olds. And you know what? Not even their fault. And many parents, I can tell you now, Iona and James, like me in Sydney, you guys live in Melbourne. Very difficult. You worry sick when your 18 and 20-year-old son and daughter have gone into the city and it's 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. They are really moments that you think about all the time, and you can prepare, but you need to make sure that you communicate those values that are critical for those people who are part of your life. And they're the things, James, that we used to look at. A simple ruler with your business name on it, giving that to people. They're all things that tell and identify those values with regards to what you see as being important.
Thanks, Jim. And I think what we've jumped into there is this conceptualization of beyond the basics of demographics, because you'll find, Iona identified a group, say 30 to 40 years old, females, but within that, which are located in New South Wales and Victoria, but within that group, there'll be subgroups with different needs, with different attitudes, different, preferences with respect to the delivery of product, different values, and different means by which they prefer to be communicated with.
Yes.
And then, so look, and I'll go back to you, Iona. I mean, what are some of the tools that we can use to break it down even further to, as we've said there, go beyond the basics?
Conversations, James.
Yes.
Yes, most definitely. It's all about knowing our client, knowing about our potential market, and it's all about knowing ourselves. If we understand our own corporate culture, and we have a clearly defined and developed corporate culture, and we enact that culture, we can take that culture with us into our conversations, and it makes our conversations so much more worthwhile. Like I said before, I suppose just to repeat myself, everything is about people that we do. So if we're not communicating, and we're not communicating effectively and collecting information as we're going along, if we don't understand that somebody, for example, in Tasmania may have a very different need as far as an education opportunity than somebody in Sydney, because they may have a much smaller range of choice, for example. So we can have we'll have a different conversation with somebody in Tasmania, and that's just an example, because there's lesser choice, or choice is more restricted in their environment. It could be a physical thing, it could be an income thing, but really when it all comes down to it, it's about understanding our own culture as a business, taking that with us and having effective conversations with our potential clients and understanding them, learning what our clients really need and what they want, because sometimes, as we know, needs and wants can be very different things. But it's about developing that point of difference also as far as the wider market's concerned. Everybody might be doing the same thing, but if we go back and we talk to our clients, and we'll discover that there was a certain reason why they chose to actually purchase or utilize our consulting services or buy our product, or subscribe to our newsletter. And that's because they saw something different in what we were doing than what our competitors were doing. So those points of difference are also incredibly important. And above all else, we have to remember that we have a relationship with people, and that people like to be communicated to, but they also like to communicate to us. So we have to provide ways that people can communicate with us, as well as us communicating with them. Back to you, Jen.
Yeah, look, and I think that's an interesting point, particularly on an organisational level. One-on-one, it's very easy to have the two-way conversations. But then as an organisation, having a two-way conversation with an individual can be quite difficult. And having multiple sources of data that inform your organisational communication strategy is critical. Certainly from a back-end perspective, we can use our Google Analytics, we can use our newsletter data, whatever it may be, to get the age, the sex, the postcode, all of that sort of information. But things which are beyond the basics, such as needs, attitude, delivery, values, and communication, a lot of that information, I think, is quite, it's difficult to obtain from raw data. And that's why the importance of feedback from a customer service, a business development, or a frontline team, and having a structure and system in place where they can report that information to the appropriate departments within the business is absolutely crucial.
Most definitely. Having those things in place and having and utilising those tools available to us. And there's a plethora of tools out there, and it also is worthwhile breaking it down. What do we really want to know? What do we want our clients to tell us? Do we just want to know about, did we provide adequate service? Did our service staff ask the right question? Did the reason that they didn't resubscribe at the end of the subscription period, was that because they weren't contacted before, a month before the subscription was due to expire? A lot of it is about that, the journey with the customer and the client or our potential clients, and establishing those touch points across that journey and building that communication model and that engagement strategy. So we're not just sending them out the occasional email saying, hey, don't forget to pay your subscription in 28 days. Hey, don't forget to, your subscription's due. Please make sure there's money in your account. We're actually talking to them and treating them and it is a relationship. So as I said before, there's a number of tools that are available to do this. And maybe I could get you to sort of briefly give us an overview, James, of some of those tools.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And there's a really interesting case study which I saw the other day, and I've got a similar sort of one up in front of us at the moment. And this is an example of communication, certainly between different age groups. And they looked at they did an analysis of text messages of teenagers versus adults. Now, 14-year-old teenagers who were setting up dinner or to go to a movie on Friday night, their series of communications or text messages would be such: the first one, hi, how's it going? The second one, up to much. The third one, what you doing Friday? The fourth one, been to the movies lately, so on and so forth. You get the picture. But by this stage, they've sent 15 individual one-sentence, one-word text messages to arrange a dinner date on Friday night. Whereas those who are in that 35 to 50-year-old age group would send one big slab of text. Now, it just goes to break down a little bit more. So we're still using the SMS service, but we're using it in different ways and breaking it down. Even further here, we have some statistics which were released on the way text message is being used. So adults, they found, tend to text to set something up. Okay, so it could be to coordinate schedules, share updates, check facts, whatever it may be. And what they'll do is they'll leave in-depth conversations for in-person meetings, or they'll prefer to do it over the phone. Whereas teens do the opposite. Okay, so if teens do form part of your mark, that's part of your communication is going to be directed, you need to think about what technology am I using, but even more so, based on what I said about the series of text messages before, how is it that I'm using it? And what's interesting here is teens don't value face-to-face communication with friends as much as they used to. So much so that the preference for in-person communication has dropped from 49% down to 32% between 2012 and 2018. Now, it's obviously been a couple of years since then, but I could only assume that it's dropped even further. In that time, though, video chat, social media, and of course text messages have actually increased as the improved method of communication. So again, what tools are you using to communicate with your clients? But again, digging even deeper, how is that you're using them? Are you sending them a big slab text message? Well, if you are, perhaps that's not going to work. Perhaps you need to send a whole lot of shorter ones or whatever it may be. So it's just one example of one element of your business being communication and how that can be impacted by your demographic. Again, also digging deeper, how is it that you're actually using that particular medium? Something else that I also wanted to touch on was the impact and business challenges. Now, demographics don't just impact our target market, okay? It impacts our employees. Again, how are we going to manage our employees? Okay, again, if we've got a younger cohort of employees, then they might prefer messages via text or updates or whatever it may be. We've talked a lot about the market. One thing that we haven't talked about, though, is capital. And this is a very interesting element which all businesses should be aware of, particularly if they're looking at growing or borrowing money or whatever it may be to keep operations growing. Because as we move towards an older age group, particularly here in Australia, those who are 65 plus will find that a lot of capital which was available 5-10 years ago is now becoming tied up and actually being liquidated for the purposes of servicing income post-retirement by way of pensions and so on and so forth. So at a really big perspective, certainly something to think about. And then the other thing is, how is the government respond to these impacts and these changes in demographics? Of course, what its populace looks like. And I mean, there's even been talks, certainly with respect to changes in superannuation contributions next year with the guarantees. Are they looking at changing those? Well, certainly it's meant to go up, but there's been talk from MPs about holding that, I suppose, as it is. Jim, coming back to you, certainly in your experience with running a business and talking to the elements that we've got up here in front of us, how do you go about managing those demographical changes?
Well, they're very, very important, because one of the very important questions that comes about is, and this was very relevant for me, James and Iona, is when do you decide to sell your business? What are those conditions that create and are created for you to sell your business? Are you forced to sell your business? Do you look at opportunity? Are you going to be acquired, or are you going to acquire? They're all fundamental questions of where you are in the business cycle, and that's really important. Something like they're estimating at the moment somewhere between 100 and 150,000 businesses may not come back as a result of the coronavirus. That's an incredible statistic. Whether it's 88,000 or not, it's a bigger. So my question to our listeners is that there are external factors playing a role on employees. It's interesting, some statistics the other day that I was looking at, approximately 22% of people in the workforce have another job outside their own other job. So they have a job, but they have another job either with technology or other aspects trying to build. 22%. 1 in 5 people have another business by being other than being employed. I find that a very interesting phenomenon that's taking place. Markets are changing. They critically are having a big impact on how and where you perform. So my question there is, where are you? Do you really understand where you are in the supply chain? Who is going to take over your position, if at all, in the supply chain? That's really critical. The whole notion of capital, well, I think that's fairly self-evident of how you're going to do things. Debt and equity, are you going to look for external partners? The rise, if you like, of equity partners in terms of venture capitalists and so on is playing a big role. How do you get additional funds and at what cost? And of course, the government, with regards to their impact of both council, state and federal, are having a very big impact, as you said. One of the things I'd like to suggest, if I can say, as a challenge, and it was really coming back to, and I want to highlight this, one of the reasons that I think, other than a whole range of other things, that was important for me was to ask questions associated with what people did in their private time. And I found, if I can just say, if I moved away in financial services, away from the direct line between what we were doing and what they wanted, and found out that they were involved with the RSL, with the golf club, with the football club, with a whole range of stuff, it then allowed me to find out what they were made of. So, for example, if I had 15% of our clients that like golf, would that not be advantageous for me to put on a golf day rather than a rowing day that has no relevance? It might be relevant for me because I like rowing, but my database does not understand that. So what I'm saying is the strategy, the alignment of strategic development with making sure you understand those challenges, but that challenge of providing those extra additional benefits to your clients. Because what we used to do, which was very interesting, and I'll share with our listeners, if I may, James, a little concept that we did. Everyone listening will have A-class clients. We used to have little cocktail parties for 90 minutes and ask A-class clients to bring a client who was not a client to mingle with the other types of people and talk with them. And that allowed us to attract and be attracted to other A-class clients. They brought them, we shared information, we got to know each other in an informal way, and we're able to do business and share business. That's the things that I think are really critical with regards to it, because at the end of the day, most things are fairly homogenous in terms of product. It's those things that differentiate you from the rest of the people in the market. And if price is the only tool or product differentiator, then I think you've got a house built of cards or straw.
Yeah, look, it's a very good point there. And before we, suppose, move on over to closing off on today and an opportunity, Jim, for you to put some questions to our listeners, I'll just get a little bit of insight from my owner, because it's certainly an expertise of yours, and that's human capital development. And if you could just talk to the idea of the impacts and challenges that you face with respect to employees, certainly now as opposed to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and then the different age groups. And then in growing a business, certainly for those who are listening, and they could be an employee, they could be a business owner, what are sort of some of the things that you would look out for, the strategies that you would implement to effectively manage different demographics, but also to stay relevant as an employer with your culture to a broad spectrum of employees that are essentially going to add value to your business?
That is a very big topic, James. Just let me. that is humongous. I'll come back to culture and people, I think, because if we haven't identified our own culture and what our culture is, and what is meaningful to us as an organisation, it's very hard to attract people to come and work with us, and it's very hard to know if they support that type of culture. It's also about looking at our business structure itself, which again is another whole big topic, and because of course, you know, different organisations operate in different ways. So you might have an organisation with a traditional hierarchical structure that has a culture of that the organisation is literally, you know, it's literally somebody tells somebody else, gives somebody an instruction, and then those instructions are actually implemented. You might have an organisation with a reasonably flat structure. So you have somebody that leads the organisation, but everyone in the organisation has roles and responsibilities in those roles, and excuse me, and employees in a flat structure are usually supported to take on more responsibility, and have and they're encouraged to show initiative and create opportunities for change and seek support to do that. So rather than it being a response to a measurement as far as productivity is concerned, it's actually driven by the people of the organisation. So when it comes to our employees and our corporate culture and our corporate, our corporate profile or our organizational profile, all of these things feed into our strategy. And if we have thought about our our strategic plan is incredibly important, because that sets down the things that we really want to achieve in the next 12 months, 3 years and 5 years commonly. Sometimes it's done differently. But so we'll have our immediate things that we want to achieve. If we haven't thought very carefully about our human capital or our people, often our people are our biggest investment as far as any organisation is concerned. And if our people believe that they are relevant and that they actually have input, they'll actually develop a sense of ownership and a sense of involvement. So there's a whole range of things we can do there. But we should, as part of that, look at our job families and look at the roles within those job families, because often it's not necessarily that we need somebody that is just going to assist somebody. We need people with specific skills bags, if you like, or specific skill sets to ensure that everything that job family needs to achieve as far as productivity is concerned actually gets achieved. Because if we've got a skills gap there somewhere, those tasks aren't getting done. Yeah. So human capital, and this is one of those subjects I can talk for hours about. So it's incredibly important. So it comes down to people, it comes down to our organizational culture, it comes down to embedding our culture in our strategy, and ensuring that our strategy supports not only our goals, but it supports our people and it supports our people to grow as well. Because we don't just grow, we shouldn't be stagnant as a business. We should actually look at opportunities for growth. And then there's always internal opportunities as well as external opportunities. So we should be constantly reviewing what we're doing internally as well as looking to external markets, because that internal review that we take and that constant that review process actually helps us make improvements, and those improvements flow through into everything. But the improvement is always people driven. So our human capital and our employees are so incredibly important. Our employees are the people that talk to our market. So if we don't have the right people in the right positions, and we haven't recruited people that are comfortable with our culture and are happy to enact our culture and have that same cultural approach, if you like, on an individual level, because the corporate approach, of course, will be broader and bigger, then it's very difficult for us to take our message out there. And when we're looking for external suppliers as well, or we've got projects and we need to bring in other stakeholders, it's important that we actually look to that as well. So whatever we do, we're actually taking that culture and we're putting it in place. And our employees, are able to support that. And as we develop our strategic process and our strategic plan and we undertake our strategic initiatives, all of those things flow through.
Can I just add a little something there if I can, James?
Absolutely. Jim, I'm handing over to you for questions, obviously, for our listeners today, and then certainly some insights based on what Iona just said.
Well, it was absolutely fantastic. I wanted to just give people a little flavour of something. In 2025, which is only 5 years away, the world's population will grow by 1 billion people. 300 million of them will be over 65. So I just give that to you as a statistic. And I also want to add to that as a teaser, by 2050, 50% of the world's population, which will be 9.7 billion, will come from Africa. 50% of the world's population will come from Africa. And the point I'm trying to make there is, do you understand what's happening in the marketplace? And that's what's really critical. Not just Africa, but what's happening worldwide, what's happening at the national level, what's happening in your markets. In fact, where is your market? So for me to summarize in just very, very quickly, because I know we're running out of time, this has been an excellent overview and reflection about people in your business and staying relevant. The question and the comments that I would love to leave with you to think about on behalf of Mentor today is simply this: be relevant, be really relevant, and solve people's problems. Solve people's problems. Individually, your staff need to do that. Culturally, the organisation, as Iona has said, you need to, so I don't care what it is that you're involved with, there has to be either explicit or implicit links in the relationship that help people solve their issues and problems. For me, that is the lesson learned today for your business. Have a fantastic day. Go and solve people's problems.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jim.
Can I just add something in there, please, James?
Of course.
Thank you. I think, thank you, Jim. And on the other side, as an organisation, consider your products, consider your services, and add value to that. Add layers of value to it, and be transparent, and invite people to give you feedback. Invite and listen to the feedback, because that's how we stay relevant. The feedback we receive at any current time operating any type of business is what the market is telling us. So, and don't just seek one person's feedback, seek a lot of feedback, and support people to engage with you. So engagement, product, market relevance, but most of all, know your client and build a relationship with them. Back to you, James. Thank you. It's been a great session today.
Excellent. Look, it's been a really fantastic session today. And look, I dare say we've only just scraped the surface on what is an absolutely huge topic. Certainly from my point of view, a few key takeaways have been the idea that demographics really can be multi-layered. You know, we can get beyond the age, sex, location, down to values, preferred means of communication. This idea of relevancy is so different for each and every cohort or sub-demographic within each there. The tools that you use to stay relevant to each of those individuals or each of those groups also changes. But also that the impact that it has not just on your market but also internally is something to consider, and that it's an ever-changing space. So really, if you're staying still, you're going backwards. So there's that constant need to remain relevant, to innovate, to constantly review, to measure and manage how you are staying relevant to your employees, to the market, to the environment as a whole. So once again, Jim and Iona, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an excellent session.
Thank you, James. It's been wonderful talking about these topics. And I look forward to our next discussion.
Absolutely, and thank you everybody for who's tuned in today. Now, look, if you'd like to catch a repeat of this or share it with your friends, please head on over to our website, which is mentor.edu.au, or head on over to our Facebook feed, where you'll actually see it's streamed live and recorded. And of course, any questions, certainly feel free to direct them to myself, which is james@mentor.edu.au. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we look forward to catching up with you again soon. See you later, everybody.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Jim. Bye, everyone.